Hello ghouls, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. As promised, I wanted to do a Halloween related video and what screams more Halloween than Beetlejuice. The sequel from the 1998 Tim Burton masterpiece was one of the most anticipated movies of this year, and it didn't disappoint. After 36 years from the previous movie, Beetlejuice delivered a lot. In it we find all the original cast members, so we have Winona Ryder, Catherine O'Hara and Michael Keaton. We are missing Alec Baldwin and Gina Davis for obvious reasons, because they have aged and of course it was impossible to make them with the same appearances of the original movie, and we all know that ghosts don't age. We also don't have Jeffrey Jones portraying the character of Charles Dees because of the legal issues that he had in 2002, and you can look that up online. I'm not going to talk about that in here. But to replace Jeffrey Jones, Tim Burton had a great idea to use stop motion in order to create the resemblance of the actor but the voice of another actor. So in this case it was genius what he has done, using one of the techniques that basically made him famous. Despite this actor missing, we still have an additional cast that enriches the story, and these characters are portrayed by Monica Bellucci, William Dafoe, Justin Theroux and Jen Ortega, that we already know from Wednesday by Tim Burton as well. I think the most important element that included Tim Burton in this movie was the character of Dolores, because her character serves to show us the background of Beetlejuice's story, so we know a little bit about him and how he became what he is now. And also this character is very interesting because it's very iconic, especially her first appearance, and how she embodies elements from other characters from other works by Tim Burton. For example, she embodies elements from Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas, and Emily from Corpse Bride, and the witch from Sleepy Hollow. All these elements combined together create an iconic character, and the scene where she appears, we see a cameo by Danny DeVito that of course was working as well with Tim Burton in the past in Batman Returns in the role of Penguin. Despite having a marginal role of a janitor, he still has an important one because he's the one that brings Dolores back to life. But let's start from the beginning. I'm going to do some spoilers because, of course, to tell you the story, I have to say something about it. It all starts with Lydia Dees, that we see now as a grown-up, and she's hosting a TV show, her own TV show about ghosts and paranormal, because she's a medium, as we know from the previous movie. She's able to see ghosts. During the show, she receives a call from her stepmother Delia, and she goes to meet her in her art gallery, because now Delia is an affirmed artist, even if she's a bit quirky as well, and she's still self-centered. And her character was very similar to Moira Rose in Schitt's Creek, and seeing Catherine O'Hara portraying a Moira in Delia's disguise was really funny because I love that character. So when Lydia meets Delia, she finds out that her father Charles has died, and we know through the story that Delia tells her that he was involved in a airplane crash and that he survived the crash but eventually was eaten alive by a shark. And all of this is done through the technique of stop motion, and that's why I love this movie, because many elements from other movies by Tim Burton are included in this one, making it unique. The idea of Charles' death was inspired by a nightmare that Tim Burton had where he was eaten alive by a shark. Lydia now has a daughter, but their relationship is not idyllic. Given Lydia has the power to see ghosts and Astrid is a non-believer, she thinks that her mother does everything because of money. And that's because Astrid lost her father and Lydia is not able to see his ghost. So that's why Astrid believes that she's a phony and everything that she says is not true. In this sense, there is a parallel between the relationship that Lydia had with her stepmother Delia and the relationship that she has now with her own daughter. In this movie, we also see Lydia change from the teenager that we knew from the original movie. And we see now that she has a codependent relationship with her manager Rory, that is portrayed by Justin Theroux. And it's Rory that will eventually bring Beetlejuice back into their life, because Lydia is tormented by the thought of Beetlejuice again. She still sees him around, and the fact that Astrid finds the leaflet from Beetlejuice that also remind us of the one that Adam and Barbara found in their attic scares Lydia, because she thinks that it is actually coming back into their lives. So when they're at the funeral that they organize for Charles, this scene is already funny because we see a group of altar boys singing the Banana Boat song, and how Delia is dealing with the sorrow of Charles' death is also hilarious, because she tries to put all this sorrow in her own art. While they're performing the funeral, Rory has the idea to propose to Lydia, upsetting very much Astrid, that is still affected by the death of her father. So she runs away from the funeral and ends up meeting a guy named Jeremy that from the start is a bit odd. In the meantime, Beetlejuice finds out that Charles died, and so he believes that this is his chance to go back tormenting Lydia to get what he wants, so that he can live the afterlife. That's how we know that now his scam scheme has gone to a higher level. He's not working by himself, but he has a full office of shrunken head people working for him, and one of them is Bob, that we will all love in this movie. And at the same time, we also find out that Dolores, that is Beetlejuice's ex-wife, performed by Monica Bellucci, is coming back to chase him. Dolores serves as the purpose for a backstory for Beetlejuice that we already knew something about, because in the previous movie we already talked about the fact that he lived through the Black Plague and that he has been married before, because as we see from the first movie, when he's getting married to Lydia, he's still holding his ex-wife's finger with the ring still on it. And in this movie we see Dolores that is actually missing her wedding finger. We have this background story for Beetlejuice in Mario Bava's style, that is an Italian director, and I think it was an influence for Tim Burton in this movie, because it's referenced twice during the movie. Beetlejuice was living during the Black Plague, and he was a grave robber when he married Dolores, that eventually poisoned him, because she's actually a soul-sucking witch. But before he dies, he has the chance to murder her using an axe, and that's why Dolores is in pieces when we first find out about her. The scene where she puts herself together is iconic, because we see her parts calling each other so that she can fix herself. And this reminds of Sally when she's putting herself back together, but also the end in Wednesday that is crawling on the floor, and we see gathering the pieces around to make Dolores a whole person again. All of this through the music of Bee Gees with the song Tragedy. There are a lot of songs in this movie that are from the 70s. For example, there is a Soul Train theme in this song that shows us this actual soul train in the afterlife, and this is a really genius concept that Tim Burton introduced in this movie. And this train leads to different locations like the Pearly Gates, the Great Beyond, the Fires of Damnation, and another one, I don't remember what it was, but it goes into different direction, and we see all these people from the 70s dancing and going into the train. The depiction of the afterlife in this movie is really interesting, because again we see different people that have died in very unusual ways. We see someone that died like Odini, there is a Santa that is all charred because probably died in a chimney, a woman that was eaten by her cats, a surfer that is in half because he's eaten by a shark. This is already the third death by shark in the Beetlejuice saga, if we can call it that. And we also see that there is an immigration office in the afterlife, but we'll talk about this in a minute. So the music is also very on point in this movie, and of course again we have the music by Danny Elfman that creates the atmosphere for Tim Burton's movie that we all know and love. Going back to the story, after Astrid meets Jeremy, she finds out that he's actually a ghost, so she starts believing that what her mother was saying was true, and that probably she has the same gift as her mother. But what she doesn't know is that Jeremy brings her to the afterlife to trick her, so that he can come back to life and leave her soul in the afterlife. That's why Lydia now needs to save her daughter and needs Beetlejuice's help. But at the same time, Beetlejuice himself needs the help of Lydia to get rid of Dolores that is chasing him. And that's the scene where we basically know about the immigration office, and where we see Astrid's father that she is able to see again after a long time. So Lydia asks for Beetlejuice's help in this sense, and we see Beetlejuice in the guises of a couple therapist. That is funny if you think about it, and ironic as well, because he wasn't able to save his own marriage, but he's trying to save Lydia and Rory, a couple, because we see how Rory is different from Lydia, and also Lydia is not really convinced about staying with him, but despite this she accepts marrying him. And at the same time, she accepts marrying Beetlejuice because that's the price that she has to pay to help her own daughter, probably because she doesn't really want to marry Rory. Eventually, they end up in the church with Beetlejuice following them, and the rest of the characters. Willem Dafoe, that portrays the cop that is trying to solve this murder that Dolores is doing during the search for Beetlejuice, and Astrid that is trying to escape the afterlife. And this scene is as iconic as the one where Dolores puts herself together. We have MacArthur Park as the soundtrack by Richard Harris. Yes, that Richard Harris, the original Dumbledore. We see the cake that is melting, and the lyrics of the song are very on point with what's happening in the scene. We also see a reference to the previous movie where they were forced to dance and sing during the dinner, and the same is happening in the scene where we see again them being forced to sing and dance during this wedding. There is also a social commentary about influencers that are the only guests apparently to this wedding. The social commentary is about people being sucked into their phone, because nowadays everyone is always on their phone, and these influencers are actually sucked into their phone, creating this mask on their face that resembled the one that Adam was making for himself during the first movie. The costumes of this movie are great because we see again during this wedding the same costumes that we had in the first one. So the red wedding dress for Lydia, and also the burgundy suit for Beetlejuice. And these are all done by Colleen Atwood, that was great in the costume choices for this movie, because she took the ones from the first movie and put them in this one, adding new costumes that are really great, especially for the one of Monica Bellucci. One of the things that left me a bit disappointed was the fact that Dolores didn't have much space into the story. Yes, we see her during the movie murdering souls by sucking their soul and pursuing into the search for Beetlejuice. But at the same time, when she finds Beetlejuice, I thought that something bigger was going to happen, and eventually this expectation was a bit disappointed. So I don't think they gave her enough space to develop this character. But at the same time, it was helpful to introduce her, because I think that's what put everything in motion to create this new story. Considering that in the first one we already knew that Beetlejuice had a wife. So I think that's the detail that brought everything back together to create this movie. So with Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, we see the return of Tim Burton as we know it, because there was a moment when Tim Burton seems to have lost that peculiarity that he had in his movies. We all love him for movies like Edward Scissorhands, Ed Wood, Batman, Sleepy Hollow. There are a lot of movies that he has done that are amazing. And it seems like in the latest years he has lost himself, and with this movie it's like he's returning to his splendor, to what he was before. Probably it was working with Disney during the shooting of Dumbo that changed his mind about what he was doing, because he himself hated working to that movie, and Michael Keaton himself said that he hated working at that movie. So probably this reminded him of his beginnings, because Tim Burton used to work for Disney at the start of his career, and he decided to leave the company because he thought he couldn't express himself, and that's what then made him what he is now. So I think working again with Disney brought this back to his memory, and he realized that he wanted to go back to what it was before, and we are all thankful for that. I highly recommend you to see this movie because it's great. I loved it. And if you like this video, please give it a thumb up, subscribe, and leave a comment down below if you have any opinions about this movie, if I left anything out from this review, and you want to add more details that maybe I missed. And I hope to see you to the next one. Happy spooky season. Bye bye.